Hey, what's going on, everybody? In this video, we're going to be doing my March wrap-up, and I'm really pleased. I finished 14 books. None of them were super long, but the majority of them were regular-sized books, so I'm really pleased with that. I just felt like I got in a really good rhythm, balancing reading with getting everything else done, and I just stuck with it. And I hope I can keep it going throughout the month of April. And, well, let's just get started. Alright, we're going to start with the 7 books that I finished for the 2 readathons I participated in. First we'll go over will be Catalyst Reed's March challenges in his rereadathon, and they were an autobiography, a memoir, and a nonfiction book for rereads. I didn't get to the biography one, but I'll leave links down below for information on those. And so let's get started with the first one, which was a reread of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Just an excellent book on Stoic philosophy. I encourage you guys to read it, even if you don't enjoy philosophy or don't think you can understand philosophy or anything like that. It's very pragmatic and down to earth and just really relatable. And I encourage everyone to go ahead and try and read it. And it's pretty short. This book is actually got more than just the meditations in it, so that's why it looks a little bit bigger than what the meditations would be by itself. But an excellent read, 5 stars. For the next book I read for a nonfiction was Jim Lacey's The First Clash, which is a history book on the Battle of Marathon between the Persians and the Athenians. And I'm giving the book 3.5 stars. I did appreciate that he brought up a lot of controversial topics and put forth his arguments, even if they were fairly heretical per se, in the academic community, I should say. And actually I agree with quite a few of them. He puts really good arguments for why he believes such and such. There were a few that I felt were just totally kind of ridiculous, namely the like half-mile sprint to the front line that the Athenians supposedly did in full armor and full phalanx formation, which I think is just kind of absurd, to be honest. But anyways, it was still a pretty fun read. There's not too many books on Marathon, to be honest, that I know about. If you guys know any more on strictly just like Marathon, definitely let me know in the comments. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed rereading this one. Now we'll get to the Irish Readathon, and I'm pleased to say that I finished all 5 books in the challenge. This one was for a book with green on the cover, which is why you're probably wondering why there's a Viking history book in the Irish Readathon. Though there is a good chapter on Hiberno Norse civilization in Ireland, which was really good. So yeah, definitely a pretty good read. It's kind of dry. I'm giving it 4 stars. For an Irish classic, I went with The Celtic Twilight by W.B. Yeats. Definitely don't read too much modern English type literature, but this was an interesting compilation of oral short stories that he recorded while traveling throughout Ireland, and they were definitely kind of like neat little campfire stories, which I've never read anything quite like it. For a book published in the last 10 years, I went with Only the Stone Survived by Morgan Llewellyn. It's a retelling of the Celtic Gaels who came to Ireland to replace the Tuatha Dé Danann. I just felt the characters were a little lackluster, and I think that's why I give the book, I believe, 3 out of 5 stars. For a book written by a female author, even though the previous book could also qualify for that, I believe, as well, I went with In Search of Ancient Ireland, which is a companion book to a PBS series, I guess, that was a documentary done over a decade ago. But I definitely learned quite a bit about Ireland, since I've never read anything specifically on just Ireland. I just felt bogged down a little bit on the monastic era and going through all the different saints that Ireland produced, such as St. Patrick and St. Columba and Columbanus and that sort of those sorts of people. And I just felt it kind of was a slog to get through those sections because they got pretty lengthy. And for the last Irish Readathon book, I read How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill, and this is actually a pretty famous history book from the 90s, but to be honest, I thought it was just kind of silly, and the whole premise of the book really doesn't make much sense. I mean, it makes sense, but he basically says, yeah, even though the Irish did this, so did the Byzantine Empire, so... And then you're kind of just wondering, does it really matter that much then? But it's a really popular history book, and I'm not really sure why, to be honest. But anyways, I only gave How the Irish Saved Civilization 2 stars, I believe. So now we can get to the books that I didn't read for readathon challenges, and I read one of the Oxford Very Short Introductions, and this one was The Earth, and this one was by Martin Redfern, and it was kind of dry in places, but some chapters were definitely interesting. I just wish he put a little bit more time into more like atmospheric conditions of the Earth, or explaining that sort of thing. There were brief sections on that near the beginning, but I really enjoyed reading them, and I just thought a little bit more could be done on more of the atmospheric parts of the Earth instead of just, the physical rock nature of the Earth, I guess you could say. I also read Lift, Fitness Culture from Naked Greeks and Acrobatics to Jazzercise and Ninja Warriors by Daniel Kunitz, and it's not a history book of exercise per se, or a history book of weightlifting, but he does have he has a few chapters on like the origins of modern, gymnasiums and fitness culture from like the 1800s, which I thought were really, really interesting. The downfall of this book is it's almost like secretly like some sort of CrossFit proselytizing work. He mentions it like literally probably like 100 times, and how CrossFit is like, it's the best thing that we've come up with so far for exercise. And if that wasn't in the book, I definitely would probably give it another star. I think I gave it 3.5 stars, just because I did learn quite a bit from, like I said, the other chapters on ancient and early modern fitness culture, which I thought were really good. In honor of the Ides of March, I read The Death of Caesar by Barry Strauss, and this is the first book by Barry Strauss that I've read, though he's got like a dozen books, and I was kind of nervous to start him because I thought maybe he just pumped out books, for the sake of it or whatever as a professor, but it turns out this was a really good book, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I thought it had the perfect amount of forward material, like setting the context, perfect amount of, the actual assassination of Caesar, which the book is about, and the perfect amount of material in the aftermath of the assassination of Caesar. So I just thought it was a really good book. Like I said, 4.5 stars out of 5, and I'm definitely going to be checking out other works by Barry Strauss. I read another Viking book, and this one was The Seawolves, A History of the Vikings by Lars Brownworth, and he's pretty well known for his podcasts, but he's also written a couple books, including this one, and I've been reading a little bit on the Vikings lately, as you saw from the earlier Viking book. But I thought this one covered almost as much material as Robert Ferguson's. Definitely not as much, but it's about half the size, to be honest, I'd say. Like, timed to, the font's a little bit bigger, and there's not quite as many pages. I just thought the bibliography was pretty weak. But I did like how the book was structured, and I believe I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because it was definitely an enjoyable read. For a book on the life sciences, I read Animal Weapons by Douglas Emlyn, and the subtitle is The Evolution of Battle, and this was a really interesting book. I've never read anything quite like it. He basically takes, his whole premise is arms races between, between animals, and especially between animals of the same species, and basically, why did the Irish elk have, 20-foot antlers, basically, and all that sort of thing. But he also compares why humans basically have the same sort of arms races, and he has a couple different, for example, conditions that must be met to explain why arms races form in the first place. And it was actually pretty convincing, and it was just a really cool blend between basically animal biological science and also human political science, which I've never read anything quite like that, and I'm really glad I read it. A review of this will be forthcoming. Also, I'll leave down below links to the reviews that I've already uploaded already, but I'll hopefully have most of these up in the near future. But for the next book, I read The Mighty Dead, Why Homer Matters by Adam Nicholson, and this was totally not what I thought it was about. For some reason, I thought it was going to be explaining why Homer is important to a modern education and stuff like that, which it is not. To be honest, I'm not really quite sure why Homer matters after reading this book. I personally have reasons why I think Homer matters, but this book was fairly abstract, and it kind of, I wouldn't say tedious, but it goes on and on about different topics relating to Homer, but basically different facets of what Homer's writings reveal. I felt the first half was definitely a lot better than the second half because I believe it started just dragging on. The redeeming the redeeming feature of this book, though, is that the writing is really, really, really good. Adam Nicholson is a true wordsmith, and it was just a pleasure to actually read it. So that definitely made up for sort of the abstractness of the volume. And for the last of the 14 books, I read Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. And this is a book on geopolitics where he goes through 10 different regions of the world and explains, basically why certain why certain countries do certain things or feel a certain way, especially with their neighbors. And I felt it was actually pretty well done. There were a few chapters I thought that could have been fleshed out definitely a lot more, but there were certain chapters that were just totally spot on and explained a lot to me about the current nature of events and why certain countries behave the way they do, at least generally speaking. Definitely encourage you guys to read that if geopolitics is your sort of thing. And so those are the 14 books that I read in the month of March. I'm really pleased with what I accomplished. I got quite a variety. I'm glad I read 7 books just for readathons. This month, April, probably won't participate in a readathon. That way I can just have a little bit more freedom with what I read. But I definitely will participate in a few more readathons in the future. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys like some of the titles I read. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below. And always remember, read victoriously.